This mobilization is the Nigerian people's call to the American government to set a timetable for withdrawing its troops from our country. We hope that the American government will take precautions to prevent any...
Will the United States truly listen to the voices of Niger's local population as they take to the streets in protest? The people of Niger have mobilized, calling for the withdrawal of U.S. troops from their country. However, the crucial question remains: what has prompted such a vehement response from the locals? Why do they insist on an urgent withdrawal? Let's find out. In the heart of West Africa lies the Republic of Niger, a nation currently grappling with the echoes of widespread dissent reverberating throughout its territory. At the center of this turbulence are fervent protests demanding the immediate withdrawal of United States military forces from Niger's soil. These demonstrations, spanning cities and villages across the nation, embody the collective frustration and determination of Niger, their sovereignty and reclaiming control over their homeland. The protests, characterized by impassioned chants and vibrant banners, manifest the deep-seated grievances that have long simmered within Nigerian society. Sparked by incidents such as the 2017 ambush in Tongo Tongo, where both American and Nigerian soldiers lost their lives, these protests represent a tipping point in the relationship between Niger and the United States. They highlight a growing disillusionment with foreign military presence and the perceived erosion of Nigerian autonomy. Amidst the backdrop of these protests, Niger finds itself at a crossroads, grappling with questions of national sovereignty, security cooperation, and the legacy of colonialism. The streets of Niger's cities pulsate with the rhythm of dissent as citizens from all walks of life converge to demand accountability and respect for their rights. The protests serve as a poignant reminder of the power of collective action and the resilience of the human spirit in the face of adversity. As the protests continue to unfold, the eyes of the world turn to Niger, where a nation grapples with the complexities of asserting its sovereignty in an increasingly interconnected world. The outcome of these protests remains uncertain, yet one thing is clear: the voices of the Nigerian people will not be silenced. But what is the history of military presence in Niger? After witnessing the protest, one does wonder why Niger has allowed America to have a military in Niger in the first place. So, for that, let's revisit historical events. Niger's journey with U.S. military presence traces back to the early 2000s, intertwining with global counterterrorism efforts and regional security dynamics. The early 2000s marked a pivotal moment in global security discourse, with the United States spearheading efforts to combat terrorism following the 9/11 attacks. Niger, nestled in the heart of West Africa, found itself thrust into the spotlight as a critical theater in this global war on terror. Recognizing the strategic significance of the Sahel region as a gateway between North Africa and Sub-Saharan Africa, the United States sought to establish a presence in Niger to counter the rising threat of extremism emanating from groups like Boko Haram and Al-Qaeda in the Islamic Maghreb (AQIM). Against this backdrop, Niger became host to several U.S. military bases strategically positioned across its territory. These installations served as vital nodes in the broader network of U.S. military operations, facilitating surveillance activities, intelligence gathering, and rapid deployment of troops to respond to emerging security threats in the region. Initially established with the primary objective of countering the rising threat of terrorism, these military bases gradually evolved into essential hubs for training and logistical support for Nigerian and allied forces. The presence of U.S. troops in Niger underscored the country's pivotal role in regional security cooperation efforts, reflecting broader efforts to build capacity and enhance interoperability among African and international partners. However, alongside the strategic imperatives driving U.S. military presence in Niger, concerns emerged regarding the extent of American involvement in Niger's internal affairs and the lack of transparency surrounding these operations. That's when the people of Niger started to have issues with the U.S. military. The historical backdrop of U.S. military presence in Niger sets the stage for understanding the complexities of the protests against foreign troops and their broader implications for regional security dynamics. Niger now navigates a socio-political terrain fraught with complexities and challenges. Governed by a semi-presidential republic, Niger's political history is characterized by a tumultuous past, marked by periods of instability, military coups, and ethnic tensions. This intricate tapestry of governance has left an indelible mark on the nation's identity, shaping its trajectory and influencing the dynamics of power and authority. Economically, Niger faces significant hurdles, ranking among the world's poorest countries. High levels of poverty, unemployment, and food insecurity plague the population, exacerbating existing socio-economic disparities and contributing to a sense of disenfranchisement among the populace. Despite its vast natural resources, including uranium and gold, Niger struggles to harness its potential for sustainable development and economic prosperity. Against this backdrop of political fragility and economic hardship, Niger's socio-political landscape becomes a fertile ground for protest mobilization and social movements. Civil society organizations and grassroots activists emerge as pivotal actors in the quest for political reform, social justice, and accountability. A shared commitment to change drives these groups, mobilizes communities, raises awareness, and advocates for the rights and interests of marginalized populations. But what are the triggers behind the protest? The recent wave of protests in Niger, calling for the departure of U.S. troops, has been fueled by a combination of immediate triggers and underlying grievances. One of the immediate triggers for the protests can be traced back to specific incidents involving U.S. military personnel, such as the 2017 ambush in Tongo Tongo. This incident, which resulted in the deaths of American and Nigerian soldiers, highlighted the human cost of foreign military interventions and fueled public anger and resentment towards the presence of foreign troops on Nigerian soil. We have already discussed it, so let's not go into detail. Moreover, the protests are symptomatic of broader grievances within Nigerian society, including high poverty levels, unemployment, and corruption. Having experienced similar challenges in their communities, the African diaspora stands in solidarity with Nigerians as they demand accountability and inclusive governance. At the heart of these protests lies a profound disillusionment, a simmering discontent with the status quo that has long plagued the nation. Nigerians, like many of their counterparts across the African continent, have grown weary of being overlooked, marginalized, and silenced. They yearn for more than the hollow promises of their leaders. They crave meaningful change, tangible improvements to their lives, and a future that holds the promise of prosperity and justice. Central to their demands is a call for greater transparency and accountability from those in power. Corruption has plagued unchecked for too long, siphoning resources away from essential services and impoverishing the populace. The people of Niger refuse to accept this as their fate any longer. They demand transparency in governance, where decisions are made openly and resources are allocated fairly for the betterment of all. Here's a reminder to please like and share the video and subscribe to our channel to watch more videos on Black culture, history, civilization, and identity. Let's continue now. The protests are fueled by a stubborn insistence on respect for their rights and dignity. Too often, Nigerians have found themselves at the mercy of arbitrary laws, oppressive policies, and a disregard for their fundamental human rights. They refuse to be treated as second-class citizens in their land, asserting their inherent dignity and worth as individuals deserving of respect and recognition. Beyond this, there is a rejection of the notion that Niger is merely a pawn in a geopolitical game played out by foreign powers. The people assert their agency and sovereignty as a nation, demanding to be heard and respected on the world stage. They refuse to be manipulated or exploited for the benefit of others. Instead, they seek to chart their course based on their aspirations and needs. In the face of adversity, the protests serve as a powerful expression of unity and resilience. Across ethnic, religious, and socio-economic divides, Nigerians stand together, united by a common vision of a better future. They are not merely protesting against the injustices of today, but striving to build a tomorrow where their voices are heard, their rights are upheld, and their dignity is respected. And what are the implications of this protest? The anti-U.S. troop protests in Niger carry significant geopolitical implications for the region and beyond, illuminating the complexities of security cooperation between African governments and external actors. At their core, these protests challenge the historical legacies of colonialism and imperialism, drawing parallels between past struggles for liberation and present-day quests for sovereignty and self-determination. The protests in Niger serve as a poignant reminder of the interplay between security imperatives and national sovereignty, particularly within the context of the Sahel region. Here, the challenges of combating terrorism, insurgencies, and organized crime often intersect with the aspirations of nations to assert their autonomy and shape their destinies. Throughout history, Africa has been shaped by its encounters with colonial domination, imprinting a deep understanding of the importance of autonomy and agency upon its nations. The scars of colonialism run deep, serving as a constant reminder of the need to safeguard sovereignty and resist external interference. In voicing their support for the protests in Niger, Africans across the continent draw upon their collective experiences of resistance and resilience. They understand all too well the struggles against oppressive regimes, the fight for self-determination, and the quest for justice and accountability. By amplifying the calls for justice and accountability in Niger, Africans stand in solidarity with their fellow brothers and sisters, recognizing that the quest for freedom and dignity knows no borders. They lend their voices to the chorus of dissent, affirming the inherent right of every nation to govern itself free from external manipulation or coercion. In doing so, they reaffirm the principles of Pan-Africanism, championing African nations' unity, solidarity, and common destiny. Through their support for the protests in Niger, they contribute to a broader movement for change across the continent, one that seeks to empower nations to forge their path towards peace, prosperity, and self-determination. What message does Niger want to give? The protests reverberate with a crucial reminder: sovereignty must never be sacrificed to pursue security. African governments are urged to prioritize the needs and aspirations of their citizens above all else. Africans' engagement with these protests is not merely a solidarity gesture. It signifies a deep commitment to challenging the prevailing norms and advocating for a fairer, more equitable global order. African involvement in these protests underscores a broader dedication to confronting entrenched power structures and promoting a world where justice and dignity prevail. Africans affirm their unwavering support for self-determination and sovereignty by standing alongside Nigerians. They reject any notion that security concerns should justify erasing fundamental rights and freedoms. How will this impact Niger and U.S. relations? The protests in Niger carry the potential to strain U.S.-Niger relations and disrupt the delicate regional security dynamics that the United States has long sought to navigate. As a key player in the Sahel region, the United States has historically wielded considerable influence and power, often shaping policies and interventions to align with its strategic interests. However, the emergence of voices of dissent from within Niger and other African nations presents a new challenge for U.S. diplomacy in the region. The United States must reckon with the reality that its policies and actions are scrutinized and questioned by the populations it aims to support. The protests are a stark reminder that African nations are not passive recipients of U.S. aid and assistance, but active participants in shaping their futures. For the United States, navigating this new dynamic requires a delicate balance between supporting regional security efforts and respecting the sovereignty and agency of African nations. It must engage with Nigerian protesters and other stakeholders in a meaningful dialogue, acknowledging their grievances and working towards solutions addressing their discontent's root causes. Moreover, the United States must recognize that its approach to regional security assistance cannot be divorced from broader concerns about governance, human rights, and accountability. Simply bolstering military capabilities or providing economic aid may no longer suffice in the face of widespread dissatisfaction with corrupt and unresponsive governments. Ultimately, the protests in Niger serve as a wake-up call for the United States to reassess its approach to engagement in the Sahel region. By listening to the voices of dissent and respecting the sovereignty of African nations, the United States can foster more genuine partnerships based on mutual respect and shared values. Failure to do so risks further alienating local populations and undermining regional stability in the long run. The protests also resonate with broader geopolitical trends, shaping Africa's relationship with external powers. Through their activism and advocacy, members amplify the voices of Nigerians and other African peoples, challenging dominant narratives and advocating for a more equitable and just world order. As the protests unfold, regional and international stakeholders must engage in dialogue and cooperation to address the root causes of public discontent and promote peace and stability in the Sahel. By standing in solidarity with Nigerians and other African peoples, the diaspora demonstrates the power of collective action and the resilience of the human spirit in the face of adversity. Now the question is, what repose did these protests get from the Niger and U.S. governments? The anti-U.S. troop protests in Niger have elicited cautious responses from both the Nigerian government and the United States, prompting reflections and considerations. The Nigerian government finds itself at a critical juncture, navigating the complex terrain of domestic dissent and external partnerships, particularly with the United States. As public pressure mounts for the government to address the grievances of its citizens, it must carefully tread the line between maintaining strategic alliances and heeding the voices of its people. While partnerships with external actors, including the United States, can bring about mutual benefits such as economic aid, security assistance, and diplomatic support, they should never come at the expense of the well-being and sovereignty of the Nigerian people. The government must recognize that such partnerships should be based on mutual respect, shared interests, and transparent dialogue. Listening to the public's concerns and aspirations is paramount. The government must engage in genuine dialogue with its citizens, addressing their grievances and working towards meaningful reforms that improve their lives and uphold their rights. Ignoring the voices of dissent risks further eroding trust in the government and fueling social unrest. Like any other external relationship, the partnership with the United States should be grounded in sovereignty and national interest principles. It should be a partnership of equals, where both parties benefit and where the rights and dignity of the Nigerian people are respected and prioritized above all else. By listening to the voices of its citizens and upholding their sovereignty, the Nigerian government can forge stronger and more sustainable partnerships with external actors, ensuring that they contribute to the country's development and prosperity in a manner that is truly beneficial for all. The United States, as a global power and key player in the Sahel region, indeed faces scrutiny and diplomatic challenges in light of allegations of misconduct and human rights abuses. While the U.S. government may downplay these allegations as mere accusations, it cannot afford to dismiss them lightly. Even if they are ultimately proven to be unfounded, the grievances voiced by local populations must be taken seriously and addressed with the utmost sincerity and respect. The protests in Niger and elsewhere are not born out of baseless rumors. They stem from genuine concerns and experiences of injustice, marginalization, and oppression. The voices of the locals carry significant weight and must be given precedence over the perspectives of external actors, including the U.S. government. For the United States, acknowledging and engaging with the grievances of local populations is not only a matter of moral responsibility, but also essential for maintaining credibility and legitimacy in the region. Disregarding the people's concerns risks further alienating them and undermining the effectiveness of U.S. policies and interventions. Moreover, by prioritizing the voices of locals and demonstrating a genuine commitment to human rights and dignity, the United States can foster stronger and more sustainable partnerships with African nations. This approach serves the interests of justice and accountability and contributes to long-term stability and prosperity in the region. Diplomatic efforts to address the protesters' grievances and maintain stability in the region are underway, with the Nigerian government and the United States engaging in dialogue with civil society organizations and other stakeholders. However, the road ahead remains fraught with challenges, as addressing the root causes of public discontent will require sustained efforts and genuine commitment from all parties involved. What reaction has this matter gathered from the influential actors? The anti-U.S. troop protests in Niger have reverberated across the region, prompting reactions from neighboring countries and regional organizations. Neighboring countries in the Sahel, such as Mali, Chad, and Burkina Faso, have closely watched the developments in Niger, mindful of the implications for their security and sovereignty. Regional organizations, such as the Economic Community of West African States (ECOWAS) and the African Union (AU), have also weighed in on the protests, calling for peaceful dialogue and respect for human rights. The widespread support from African nations for the protests in Niger underscores the growing strength of Pan-Africanism across the continent. This solidarity demonstrates that African nations are increasingly united in pursuing justice, dignity, and self-determination, regardless of external pressures or influences. The voices of the local population in Niger and throughout Africa are indeed being heard loud and clear. The demands for accountability, transparency, and respect for sovereignty resonate not only within Niger, but also resonate with the broader aspirations of people across the continent. In the face of this united front, the stance of the United States becomes increasingly marginalized. While the U.S. government may express its opinions or concerns, it cannot dictate the course of events in Niger or any other African nation. The era of unilateral interventionism and imposition of external agendas is waning, giving way to a new era where African nations assert their agency and chart their destinies. The demand for the withdrawal of U.S. troops from Niger and other regions reflects the desire of local populations to reclaim control over their security and governance. It sends a clear message that African nations are no longer willing to be mere pawns in geopolitical games by foreign powers. In this evolving landscape, the United States must heed the calls of the local population and respect their sovereignty. It must engage in meaningful dialogue, address legitimate grievances, and recalibrate its approach to engagement in Africa based on mutual respect and partnership principles. Ultimately, the support from African nations for the protests in Niger signals a transformative shift in the dynamics of power and influence in the region. It heralds a new chapter in the journey towards a more just, equitable, and empowered Africa, where the voices of the people reign supreme and where Pan-African solidarity serves as a driving force for progress and prosperity. Do you think the U.S. must take its troops back as soon as possible? Does anything matter more than what locals are saying? Let us know in the comment section. Will Niger locals' voice be valued? Do you want to watch more videos like this one? If so, subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon next to it. We have decided to bring videos on something nobody talks about: the Black culture, civilization, history, and evidence about how glorious Blacks have been. Thanks for watching, and until the next video, stay tuned.